Ever think about what really powers medical breakthroughs? I mean, the stuff behind the scenes. There's this huge global market for something most people haven't even heard of.
Uh-huh.
Fetal bovine serum, get this. It's set to hit $1.75 billion in 2025. Billion.
Yeah, it's pretty staggering when you think about it. And this FBS, it's absolutely fundamental for a lot of research.
Right. Like, what exactly is it? For those who maybe don't know.
Basically, think of it as a super rich nutrient broth for cells grown in a lab. It's got all the growth factors and proteins they need to thrive outside the body. So it's essential for, biopharmaceuticals, vaccine production, loads of research.
Okay, essential. Got it. And that's why we wanted to really dig into this. We've got a 2025 market report here that forecasts all the way out to 2033.
All right, it gives us a pretty detailed roadmap. Market sizes, growth rates, regional breakdowns, what's driving it, what's holding it back.
Exactly. So our mission today is simple. Unpack the key insights from this report. Give everyone a clear picture of this, well, surprisingly significant market.
Okay, let's kick things off with the big picture. The report confirms that global market size, around $1.75 billion for 2025.
Yeah.
But the growth projection is pretty dramatic. It's expected to shoot up to over $5.35 billion by 2033.
Wow. Okay. That's a huge jump.
It is. We're talking a compound annual growth rate, a
Yeah.
CAGR,
Uh,
15% between 2025 and 2033.
15%. That's really strong, sustained growth. So what's fueling that?
Well, the report singles out one primary driver, the rising demand for cell culture media, specifically for making biopharmaceuticals and vaccines.
That makes total sense. I mean, think about the push for new drugs, new vaccines, especially recently.
Exactly. The health of the FBS market is almost like a proxy, a direct indicator of just how much innovation is happening in biotech and pharma globally.
So where is this demand actually coming from, geographically speaking?
Right, the regional breakdown is really interesting. North America is currently the leader, holds the biggest slice of the pie, actually over 40%.
40%. Okay.
Yeah, which translates to about $648 million in 2025. And it's still projected to grow pretty steadily, a TGR of 13.4% through 2033.
And the U.S. is the main part of that, I assume.
Dominantly. The U.S. market alone is pegged at around $511 million, with a TGR just slightly lower at 13.2%. But Canada and Mexico are showing strong growth too, actually slightly higher TGRs, around 14%.
What makes North America so dominant right now?
It really comes down to the established strength of its sectors. You've got major biopharma companies, tons of research institutions, and a big focus on regenerative medicine.
Ah, okay. The tissue repair stuff.
Exactly. They're all heavy users of FBS.
Makes sense. What about Europe?
Europe's the second biggest player. Holds over 30% of the market share. That's around $508 million in 2025, with a very solid projected TGR of 14%.
Pretty close to North America's growth rate.
Very close. And within Europe, you have some key markets. Germany's a big one, over $100 million, growing at 14.2%, largely thanks to its biopharma and vaccine focus. The UK is also significant, around $85 million. And interestingly, it has a slightly higher CAGR at 14.8%. The report mentions strict regulations there, which might influence things.
Yeah. Interesting.
Then you've got France, Italy, Russia, all contributing significantly. It's really driven by that strong European biotech and pharma base, plus ongoing R&D investment.
Okay, so North America and Europe are the big players now, but where's the fastest growth happening?
Well, that's clearly the Asia-Pacific region, APAC.
Right.
It currently holds about 23% of the market, so roughly $420 million in 2025. But its projected CAGR is almost 18%, 17.9% to be exact.
Wow, nearly 18%. That's way ahead of the other.
By far. It's the real engine of future growth in this market. China's a huge part of that, naturally. At $176 million market size now, going at 17.4%. They're using FBS heavily for vaccines and regenerative medicine, too.
Okay, who else in APAC?
Japan's significant, around $58 million, growing at 16.4%. South Korea's interesting, too, about $50 million, growing at 17%. And the report specifically mentions strong government and private investment there.
In India, I often hear about their pharma growth.
You're right to ask. India actually has the highest projected growth rate in the whole region, maybe the world, almost 20%, 19.8%.
Incredible.
Yeah, driven by their expanding biotech and pharma sectors and government support. APAC is definitely the region to watch. This kind of growth signals a potential shift, where biopharma innovation is really accelerating.
Absolutely. Okay, what about the other regions? South America?
South America holds a smaller share, just over 5%. That's about $66.5 million in 2025. But still, a healthy CAGR projected at 15.7%.
Still growing fast then.
Yeah. Brazil's the main market there, around $28 million, growing over 16%. Argentina smaller, but growing even faster, 16.6%. The report notes the strong cattle industry there, which obviously ties into FBS supply.
Makes sense. And the Middle East?
Interestingly, the Middle East has a smaller share than South America, around 2%, but its actual market size in 2025 is slightly larger, about $70 million, and its growth rate is also high, 16.4% CAGR.
Huh. Why is that?
Increasing investments in biotech, especially in places like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, they're both projected to grow at nearly 17%. Lots of government initiatives pushing life sciences.
Okay. And lastly, Africa.
Africa accounts for the smallest share, around 1%, roughly $38.5 million in 2025. The projected CAGR is 15.3%, so still in line with the global average growth.
Driven by?
Primarily South Africa, which is about $13.5 million and growing at 16.2%, and Nigeria to a lesser extent. The drivers mentioned are rising biopharma research and, again, vaccine production.
So really, despite the different market sizes now, the trend is pretty universal, growth everywhere.
Absolutely. It just underscores how fundamental FBS is becoming for medical science globally.
So let's shift gears a bit. How is all this FBS actually being used? What are the applications?
Right, the report breaks that down. It looks like drug discovery is probably the biggest chunk right now.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, all that basic cell culture research, preclinical testing for new drugs, making biopharmaceuticals like monoclonal antibodies, vaccines, regenerative medicine, it all falls under that umbrella.
So foundational research and development work, basically.
Exactly. But what's really interesting is the fastest growing application segment.
Which is?
Human and animal vaccine production.
Ah, okay. Not surprising, perhaps.
No, especially given, well, recent history. The demand for COVID vaccines, flu shots, but also veterinary vaccines, plus just the overall increase in biopharma R&D fuels this.
Right, that constant pipeline development.
Yeah. The report also mentions a few others briefly, like cell media culture itself, in vitro fertilization, diagnostics, and just a general others category. So it's used pretty widely.
Definitely versatile stuff.
Okay.
Okay, so if those are the applications, who are the actual end users buying all this FBS?
Good question. The report splits it mainly between industry, healthcare facilities, and research institutes.
And industry's the biggest.
Yep, holds the largest share. This is your biopharma companies, the vaccine manufacturers, the ones developing gene therapies, monoclonal antibodies, regenerative medicine, the big commercial players.
Right, the ones doing the large-scale production and development.
Exactly. But the report highlights rapid growth in the healthcare facilities segment.
Oh, interesting. So hospitals and clinics.
Yeah, hospitals, clinical research labs. It suggests they're doing more cell culture-based work directly, maybe for regenerative therapies like stem cells, some vaccine work, cancer research.
And maybe diagnostics development, too.
Could be. Plus, the report mentions expanding clinical trials and the push towards personalized medicine. That would drive demand within healthcare settings themselves, not just in the big pharma companies.
That makes sense. As treatments get more tailored, the tools needed, like cell cultures, become more common, closer to the patient.
Precisely. And then, of course, research and academic institutes are still a key end user. They're doing the foundational work.
The pipeline feeders, essentially.
Yeah. Okay, so we know the market's big, it's growing fast, we know how it's used and who's using it. What are the core drivers pushing this expansion, according to the report?
Well, we touched on some already. A big one is the increasing investment, globally, in regenerative medicine and stem cell research. These fields are incredibly reliant on high-quality cell culture.
Right, they need lots of FBS.
Exactly. Another major driver is just the general expansion of the biotech and pharmaceutical industries worldwide. More companies, more research, more drug development. It all requires these essential growth supplements like FBS.
And the basic research side, too.
Absolutely. The report points to growing research activities in academic labs, clinical labs, all focus on drug discovery and understanding diseases. It all adds up to more demand.
Okay, so strong drivers, but are there any headwinds, any restraints mentioned that could slow things down?
Yes, a couple of significant ones. First, there are ethical concerns surrounding animal-derived products.
Ah, right, because it comes from fetal calves.
Precisely. Those ethical considerations, combined with associated regulatory restrictions in some regions, can definitely limit market expansion or push people to look for alternatives.
Okay, that's a big one. Anything else?
The other major restraint is price volatility.
Makes sense. It's tied to agriculture,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah, the report links it to supply chain issues and, crucially, fluctuations in cattle production, droughts, diseases, market changes. They can all impact the supply and therefore the price of FBS, making it less predictable.
Which can be tough for labs budgeting projects.
Exactly. That instability is a definite challenge.
Okay. So drivers and restraints. What about overall market trends? What's the general direction besides just growth?
Well, one key trend reinforces what we've discussed,
Yeah.
simply the increasing demand for FBS, specifically in those core biopharma and cell culture applications. That's the underlying current.
Right.
But another important trend is a rising focus on ethical sourcing and regulatory compliance, how the serum is collected, processed, and ensuring its quality and safety.
So more scrutiny on the supply chain itself.
Yeah, likely driven by both regulators and the end users wanting consistency and, well, ethically sourced materials where possible. Transparency is becoming more important.
Okay. And what about the companies actually in this market? The competitive landscape.
The report describes it as highly competitive. You've got several key global players,
Compete.
primarily product quality, purity levels, and maybe most importantly, the reliability of their supply chain. Can they consistently deliver high-quality FBS?
Right. Consistency is key for research.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And interestingly, there's a related trend mentioned, increasing investment by these players and others in developing serum-free alternatives.
So trying to get away from the reliance on FBS.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Or at least offering options. Also, investments in advanced filtration technologies to improve the quality and consistency of traditional FBS.
So innovation on both fronts, alternatives, and improving the existing product.
Exactly. The report actually gives an example, a collaboration from March 2024 between Sartorius and LFB Biomanufacturing, focusing on cell line development and manufacturing, which touches on these areas.
Okay, interesting. So let's try and wrap this up. What are the main takeaways here?
Well, first, the sheer scale and growth. We're looking at a market that's already huge, $1.75 billion in 2025, and rocketing towards $5.35 billion by 2033. That's a massive expansion.
Yeah, driven by that 15% annual growth. And geographically, while North America and Europe lead now, Asia Pacific is the growth hotspot, particularly China and India.
Right. Application-wise, drug discovery is dominant, but vaccine production is the fastest growing segment, which tells a story in itself.
And the big users are in the biopharma industry, though healthcare facilities are catching up fast.
Key drivers are investments in cutting-edge areas like regenerative medicine, plus the overall boom in biotech and pharma R&D.
But facing challenges from ethical concerns and, importantly, price volatility linked to the supply chain.
And the trends show continued demand, but also a growing focus on ethical sourcing, quality, and, significantly, the development of serum-free alternatives.
It really highlights how this sort of hidden component, FBS, is absolutely vital for so much medical progress. The treatments, the vaccines, a lot hinges on this supply.
It truly does. It underpins a vast amount of the science that directly impacts our health.
Which leads to a final thought for our listeners, for you, the learner. We've talked about ethical concerns and price volatility being restraints. So considering that, how might this increasing focus on developing and adopting serum-free alternatives fundamentally reshape this whole market down the line? What could that mean for, say, the speed or the cost of developing the next generation of drugs and therapies that affect all of us?
That's a really crucial question. Does moving away from FBS speed things up, slow things down, make it cheaper, more expensive? How does it change the R&D equation?
Exactly. It's this fascinating interplay between ethics, economics, and scientific progress, all happening in this critical but often unseen corner of the life sciences. Definitely something to think about.